I'm going to talk about the science of speech. And first of all, I'd like to talk a little bit about a movie, My Fair Lady, which is based on a musical from 1956, based on an old play from 1913, and it goes back to a Greek myth. And the story is a story of a poor girl who tries to come across as a rich girl. So it's an old story that we've seen many times in Hollywood. The characters in the story are first Eliza Doolittle is a flower girl, played by Audrey Hepburn. Henry Higgins is the other main character, who's an expert in phonetics. Colonel Pickering is another gentleman. Freddie is a young gentleman, and Freddie's mother. And if you can watch the scene, you'll be able to see these. A few notes of dialogue of some words that will come up in this scene. This is set around 100 years ago, and at that time, and in fact until 1972. So at the time the film was made, this money was still in use in England, and it was pre-decimal money. So now 100 pence is £1. Very simple, very easy to understand. At the time, it was a bit more complicated. There were 12 pennies in 1 shilling. 10 shillings was a crown, and 20 shillings was a pound. So if people were to say 4 and 6, that would be 4 shillings and sixpence. And the also even more confusing, pennies could be broken down. So the penny wasn't the smallest unit. You could have a half a penny or a quarter of a penny. So a quarter of a penny was called a farthing. Half a penny was called halfpence or a halfpenny. And then 2 pennies were twopence, and 3 pennies were threepence. So you may have seen this kind of bicycle somewhere, and in English that's called a penny farthing. So we don't still use those kind of bicycles, but the name for those bicycles is a penny farthing, which I guess still continues in the language. Here are some words that will appear in the movie scene. Attack, phonetics, Lisson Grove, Hampton Court and Cambridge. See if you can guess which one's which. And here are some questions to think about for the movie. Where is Eliza from? Where is Freddie's mother from? Where is Colonel Pickering from? And how does Higgins know where people are from? And how many different accents can Higgins recognise? How does he record speech? And what differences do you notice about the way that different people speak? And how would they be shown in writing? So the character of one of the models for the character of Henry Higgins in this scene is a man called Henry Sweet, who was an early linguist, someone in England who studied languages. He was a specialist in Germanic languages, which included Anglo-Saxon, Old Icelandic and West Saxon. And he invented an alphabet, which is the model for the IPA, which we will talk about in a moment. He also wrote a book. He was interested in spelling reform, and he wrote a book called The Principles of Spelling Reform, which I think is still in print. You can still get this book today. So his ideas of spelling reform were, first of all, English spelling. As you will know if you've ever studied English spelling, it's terrible. And one reason is that it's kind of based on 16th century pronunciation. So the way that people spoke in the 16th century, the spelling makes sense. So for example, in 500 years ago, people would say man, lana, kara, father and water for these words. And the pronunciations have changed over the years. So now the spelling is not very helpful. So, for example, if people are trying to learn English, then they will struggle because, for example, if you speak German, you'll know that recht is the English word right. But when you look at the English spelling, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Similarly, Name is the German for name. English has the same spelling, but a very strange pronunciation. And also, it makes it more difficult for English speakers to learn other languages when they come across words that they're maybe familiar with in English. So he had some suggestions to improve English spelling. And these are a few examples of different alphabets, different spelling systems that were suggested at the time. And of course, the one on the left is the normal way of spelling, which we still use. So none of these other suggestions, unfortunately, none of these suggestions were actually used to change English spelling. His preferred alphabet was what he called the Romic alphabet. And in this alphabet, it has the letters A, E, I, O, U, as in glass, bit, bit, not, and full. And if you have two letters, so for example, beat would be spelt with I, fool would be spelt with U. And for diphthongs, which is when two sounds go together, boy would just be spelt BOI, and high would be spelt HAI. So very simple. And as I said, this spelling alphabet was not adopted. We still use the old way we've spelt words since the 16th century. So, before we go on, there's a few very useful words that we'll need to talk about. One of them is a consonant, a vowel, a syllable, a letter, and a phoneme. And you'll need to try to work out what these words mean. And so let's go on to two of these words, a letter and a phoneme. You're probably familiar with letters. So a letter is the smallest unit of writing. If you break down writing into the smallest parts, break down the sentences into words, break down the words, and you end up with letters. So a letter is the smallest unit of writing in a language. And a phoneme, probably a word you have not heard before, is the smallest unit of sound in a language. So if you were to listen to the way a language is spoken and break it down into the smallest possible sounds that you can hear, then those would be phonemes. So, how many phonemes are there in Japanese? How many different sounds, if you were to break Japanese into the smallest different sounds you can make, how many would you get? Well, some of you may be thinking it's 50. It's not. It's somewhere between 20 and 30. How many? Often Japanese speakers will confuse hiragana and katakana with phonemes, but they're not individual sounds. So kaki kuke ko is a k and an a k and an i, a k and an u, k e and k o. So there's only six. There are six sounds. So there's a k, and then the a, i, u, e, o are used with all the other katakana. So there's only between 20 and 30. Exactly how many are there? I think there are exactly 22. And these are, first of all, the Japanese vowels. There are 5 Japanese vowels: a, i, u, e, o. And just a quick note on this picture. This is called a cardinal vowel chart, and this is usually how we show vowels. And this is kind of a picture of the mouth. So the where these vowels are is where they come from within the vowel, within the mouth. So we talk about high vowels and low vowels. So just to give you a few examples, if you were to say T, E, then E, you're pushing your tongue up in your mouth and the sound towards the front. So this is a high front vowel. If you were to say oo, then oo, you're pushing the sound up and your tongue is kind of pushing the sound to the back. So this is a high back vowel sound. And if you get a sore throat and go to the doctor will tell you to say ah. And when you say ah, you're pushing your tongue down. So this is a low vowel, and it's kind of at the back. So this is these are the positions on this chart show where these vowels come from. So a is a low back vowel, e is a high front vowel, u is a high back vowel, and e is at the front in the middle, and o is at the back in the middle. We can then, those are the vowels then, we can then look at the consonants, and this is a consonant chart. So basically a consonant is when we are stopping the sound. So a vowel is a sound, and a consonant is usually a stop or a start or a something at the beginning or end of a vowel sound usually. So we have stops and flaps and fricatives and affricates and nasals and approximates. Stop is when we're just stopping the sound. Nasal is the nose. And then we have along the top, this is bilabial, means the two lips. So for example, p and b, we're using our lips to make these sounds, and these are stops. Stop. But then alveolar is further back in the mouth. So t and d, we're putting our tongue somewhere on the top of the mouth. Post alveolar is further back, and then palatal is further back, and velar, k, and g is further back still, and then glottal is in the at the back of the throat. So we can see in Japanese we've got p, b, t, d, k, g, which are all stops. There's a d, da, di, da, da, do, is a flap post alveolar. Then there are fricatives, which is where we're kind of blowing like a f or s or z or sh. So we're that's a fricative. And then h as well is a fricative. And then there's affricates, t and ch and j. And then the nasals are m and n and g, ng, m, n, ng. And then approximates are kind of consonants, so y and w. And then there's another one which is that one. Did you hear it? And that's a glottal stop, which has no sound, but it is one of the Japanese sounds. So another thing then with when we're talking about sounds is what's called an allophone. And an allophone, again, this may have, when you were trying to count the Japanese sounds, you may have missed a few of them. So when you say sashisu so, these are usually thought of as sasisu so. So it's thought of as the same sound. But in fact, in the ear, and when you say the sound, that the sh is not the same. So sashisu so. Those are in fact two different sounds in the ear, but these are called allophones because they're considered logically they're the same sound, and the same with tachi tu teto rather than tati tu teto are also allophones. However, shashu shesho are not the same as sasu seso, and chachu checho. Che is not often found in Japanese words, but they're not the same as tachi cheto. So those are called allophones, and so those are some Japanese vowels and consonants, and if we add them up, I think there are 22. Next then, how about English? How many phonemes do you think there are in English? What would you guess? More than Japanese? Less than Japanese? The same as Japanese? In fact, there are around twice as many. So this makes English a bit more tricky for Japanese people to speak, because there are twice as many sounds that you need to use to speak English. How many vowels are there? So how many vowels are there in Japanese? How many in English? How many in spoken language? And how many in written language? Well, in Japanese, there are, in spoken Japanese, there are 5 vowel sounds, a, i, u, e, o. And when you're writing Japanese, there are 5 vowels, and these are called a, i, u, e, o. And their sound is a, i, u, e, o. This is wonderful. This is very easy to understand and very logical. In English, so when we're writing English, we also have 5 vowels, A, E, I, O, U. However, when we're speaking English, there are more sounds, and there are, I think, about 12 different sounds. 12, so more than twice as many vowels in English as there are in Japanese. Consonants then, when we're writing English, how many consonants are there? How many in written Japanese? Well, so when we're writing English, the English alphabet is 26 letters, 5 vowels, 21 consonants. And just like the 5 vowels written down, there are more than 5 sounds. In the same way, there are more than 21 sounds in English. When we put together different consonants, we can make other sounds like TH and CH and SH, and so on. Written Japanese, how many consonants? There's only one. N is the only consonant in Japanese. All the other written Japanese symbols are syllables. So it's a consonant plus a vowel combined together, which is a syllable, which I'll talk about in a moment. Just to talk about the final consonant in Japanese then, and more about allophones. If you listen carefully to kan, kai, kantan, kanban, kangaeru, you'll hear that in fact this n sound appears in different situations. The sound is slightly different. Sometimes it's n, sometimes it's and sometimes it's ng. But of course, when a ma or a na is a different sound, but these are all allophones, so you think of n and and ng is thought of as the same sound in Japanese. So let's just talk about syllables for a moment. So a syllable is a sound, a group of sounds surrounding a vowel. So it could be some consonants followed by a vowel followed by some more consonants. So in English, these are all words in English which are one syllable. So I is one syllable, me is one syllable, me is a consonant, then a vowel. Dog is a syllable. Stop is a syllable. That's ST. There's 2 consonants at the beginning, 1 consonant at the end. Twelfths is one syllable. That's two consonants at the beginning. 1, 2, 3, 4 consonants at the end. Strengths is three consonants at the beginning and 3 consonants at the end. And th are 3 different sounds, but 5 letters to be. So again, we can see that the letters don't correspond exactly to the sounds because we can combine letters and th to make sounds. Syllables then are usually thought of as an onset and rhyme. So there's a sound at the beginning and a sound at the end. The sound at the end is the rhyme. And the rhyme is made up of a nucleus. Nucleus is the bit in the middle, and the coda is the bit at the end. So, for example, big is b, ig, and ig is I and g. Ka is so Japanese. The Japanese writing system is often thought of as as syllables. So kaki, kuke, ko. Each one of those is a syllable. And Japanese is made up of syllables, mostly just very simple syllables with one consonant and 1 vowel. Strength, then ength is the rhyme and strut is the onset. So just talking about rhymes and a different spelling of rhyme, and also another demonstration of how difficult English spelling is. So hat and cat both rhyme. Tall and wall both rhyme. So AT, the spelling is the same. Unfortunately, car and war don't rhyme. So the AR is spelled the same spelling, but a different pronunciation. Work and pork are not the same. And of course, hat and tall are not the same. So A, depending on the letters around A, the pronunciation will change, which is where we get more vowels. Japanese. So Japanese has 5 vowels, very simple. 5 vowels in spoken Japanese, 5 vowels in written Japanese. English has more. So one thing that Henry Sweet realised when he was thinking about alphabets and thinking about the sound of English, he realised that there are a lot more sounds in spoken English than the 5 letters. And his suggestion was that you could take the type. Printing was used bits of metal called type. And if you turn them upside down, you could make new letters. So one of his suggestions was, let's use the same type, but let's turn some of the letters upside down and make new characters that we can use to show these different sounds. One of these that you may have seen is what's called the schwa. And schwa is used for the unstressed vowel. So if you say about, the is a schwa. And this takes us onto the International Phonetic Alphabet, which came from Henry Sweet's work, which was created around 1888. And it was intended to be possible to write any sound in any human language. And it gets revised every few years, often to add more sounds when more languages are discovered. There are 107 letters, 52 diacritics, so accents or on the top or underneath, and then 19 suprasegmentals, which, for example, show the length of a sound or the tone, and stress, where the stress is in a word, and the intonation. Now, good news is I don't expect anybody to learn the whole of the International Phonetic Alphabet. If you want to, that's wonderful. English uses around 27 consonants and around 15 vowels. I said there were 12 before. I was lying. There are more. And we can see, so for example, we can see how pronunciation is different. We can write this down using IPA, using the International Phonetic Alphabet. So we can see this is two different words. In fact, this is the same word that's written down for two different pronunciations. The top one says international, and the bottom one says international. And this shows the top one is international in received pronunciation, which is standard British English. The bottom one shows international in American pronunciation, general American, which is standard American pronunciation. So we can see we can use this very usefully to show the different sounds. That's a chart showing various sounds, consonants that are in the IPA. English has a few more consonants that Japanese doesn't have. Notably, it has the dental fricative, or dental fricatives, th and the. Dental means the teeth, so when you touch your tongue on your teeth, you can come up with a th or a the sound. This is quite an unusual sound. Most languages don't have this sound. Japanese doesn't have this sound, which is actually Japanese is quite a normal language in the pronunciation and the number of consonants and vowels. English is a bit strange for having this th or the sound. There's also a l and a r. There's a distinction between those sounds. So, how many phonemes are there in English? We established there are between 40 and 50, about twice as many as in Japanese. How many are there exactly? Well, there are probably more than 40, but probably less than 45. And in fact, it depends on the person. So different dialects of English have different numbers of phonemes. And I'll try to give you a few examples where this happens systematically. So, for example, trap and bath. For some English speakers, these are two different sounds. And for some English speakers, trap and bath, it's the same sound. Pan and pen. For some English speakers, pen and pen are the same sound. Some speakers, they're different. Father and farther. In my English, these are the same sound. For some English speakers, the R is pronounced in farther. Stir and stare. In my English, these are different. In some Englishes, stare and stare are the same. Paw and paw, I think I would pronounce those the same. Some English speakers will pronounce these poor and paw. Cot and court, I pronounce differently. Some people pronounce them the same. Which and which, I pronounce the same. Some speakers will pronounce which with a wh, with a aspirated W. And in fact, if you look at some katakana words, it looks like whoever taught English words in Japan, they pronounce the hua. So, for example, white has got a hot on at the beginning, which is like a hua in which. And loch is a Scottish word for a lake. For most English speakers not in Scotland, this would be pronounced loch, and loch would be the same. So those are some examples where some dialects have fewer or more English sounds. The vowels then, there are a few more vowels in English than you will find in Japanese. And another, so one thing that's different between English and Japanese, in Japanese, if you have a long vowel, it's usually the same sound, just longer. So E and E, it's the same E, but just longer. Whereas in English, if you, for example, bid and bead, bead is a higher vowel than bid. So the sound actually changes for a longer vowel or a shorter vowel. Diphthongs, day, Japanese diphthongs where there are two vowels together, I is an a and an e, and they're quite pure sounds, whereas English diphthongs tend to be more like glides, so the vowels kind of mash together a bit more. And then there are also some diphthongs and triphthongs. So a triphthong is where there are three vowel sounds. So this is Australian English, and this is a chart where we can show how these words are pronounced in Australian English. So this is a boy, boyd. This is boyd. Toad. This is a toad. This is hide. This is loud, and this is paid. So we can see using these charts how English sounds are different, and also how different English sounds are different. So just in conclusion then, the IPA, the International Phonetic Alphabet, tries to show all pronunciations in all languages. You don't need to learn every character, don't worry, but be familiar with what some of the characters mean. And this could be very helpful when we're talking about different pronunciation of English for different dialects. That's all for today. Thank you very much.